This is the Construction Insiders Podcast. I'm Jessica Busch, bringing you the newest trends and strategies in construction, essential to anyone in the industry. Thanks for joining us again for part 2 of the Higher Education Deep Dive. As we discussed earlier on part 1,
I would say the last 5 years and the inflationary pressures on cost have really hit higher ed institutions uniquely.
We just completed a $3.2 billion campaign. We have over 100,000 volunteers and donors to Vanderbilt.
And it's about taking advantage of a market like this. When there is fear in the market, prices come down and the opportunity is there.
So we had an opportunity with stakeholders to identify this incredible campus.
all right, gentlemen, how do you go about choosing partners for this project we talked about in part 1? We're just going to continue down that path if that's okay. How do you go about choosing partners for such a historic property like this Chelsea campus here in New York? And what does that process look like? The balance of local presence, national presence, this specific expertise. How'd you manage that?
I think first and foremost in construction, you have to be self-aware. If you're not the expert in the market, go find one. So for us in New York City, we absolutely were not. So we looked around for the right owner's representative, the right partner to literally be our extension in Chelsea. And we were looking for one that not only had experience with higher education, but also with renovations of historic facilities. And so as we did our research and our competitive procurement process, we felt like Cumming Group and RJ Panda and specifically brought that level of experience, that higher ed historical renovation combination that we were really looking for, as well as a deep familiarity with the regulatory framework in New York City, the historic framework in New York City, religious facilities. All of these bring a unique challenge in construction, and we wanted to make sure we had somebody on our side that had deep experience in all of those. The next step was finding the right designer. We were very fortunate that Buyer, Blinder & Bell has decades of experience with this specific campus at GTS. So they were a natural pick for us. And like I said, any room, any wall, any previous renovation, they not only have experience with and understanding of, they likely have prints and drawings.
Mitigating those risks.
That's right. So that was a key second step. And I think the third step is you have to get the right prime contractor. That is much more exhaustive.
As we're near the end of that process, taking a long-term lease at a 13 building historic campus property here in Chelsea has to present quite a few, let's call them unique challenges, right? How do you balance that dance of preservation, restoration, but meeting very modern educational needs? What upgrades go into a campus? How do you decide what stays, what goes? And
Yeah, well, I'll jump into that first.
Yeah.
I think with a campus like the General Theological Seminary campus in Chelsea, which is a historic campus, many individual buildings, a beautiful enclosed green space on it. What you really want to focus on is preserving what is character defining and modernizing what is mission critical. So what we're looking at is how do we, especially around a landmarked property, this property is governed by the Landmarks Preservation Commission. It's protected, rightfully so. It's a beautiful, beautiful campus. And so we want to make sure to focus on how do we restore the facades? How do we restore the windows? How do we bring back those unique craftspeople elements of this campus to really showcase them, because it is such a unique place, especially in New York City. There are not places like this that exist. They're incredibly rare. And then the next piece is how do we make sure that this campus, which is going to operate 24 hours a day, 12 months a year, there's not going to be a whole lot of time within once the campus becomes operational to make future upgrades, that we need to be as thoughtful about improving this owner-occupied, owner-operated campus and upgrading the MEP systems, looking at sustainability. How do we make sure to invest in quality, easily maintainable types of materials? So those are all part of the selection process as we're going through design with Buyer Blender Bell and Loring Engineers as the MEP designer.
So, and can I just add something
Yeah.
maybe that bridges a little bit of what Matt was sharing and now RJ? So when we talk about finding our partners in this
Hmm.
project, you know, I have a job to do on the ground too outside of construction is really activate campus at a time when it needs to undergo significant restoration and construction. So finding partners that understand that and how we balance doing the work that needs to happen to open for students in the fall of 26, while at the same time we can host weddings in the historic chapel.
Get the
We
income
can,
coming in.
yeah, we
Yeah.
can have corporate events. We can
Yeah.
have our signature faculty lectures and book signings and provost events. Finding the right partners who understand that and will engage in that conversation, those dialogues, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And for me, not having a construction background
Hmm.
has been critical are the people that you work with every day in understanding that. And so I think that's been a special part of the selection process, but also really balances like this campus that has a chapel, it has an event space, it has classrooms, it's got residence halls. Like how do we use that while we're upgrading it at the same time?
Right.
Yeah.
So New York might be special, but there's a lot of other big cities where, universities, higher education teams can be looking at, hey, should we do something similar to these guys? But when you're navigating something like regulatory issues, especially here in New York, landmarks preservation commission, Department of Buildings, what are some of the key factors that have been helpful to keep, an eye on, really what you need to know from the get-go? Because it is, I'm assuming, quite a dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start by talking about community engagement.
Mhm.
I think that's a bit of a through line here for us. Um, Before we even had full or will have full sort of management of this campus,
Yeah.
they hired someone like myself to be on the ground to help build those relationships so that the community sees the impact of having a Vanderbilt University in its neighborhood. That I could meet with elected officials, talk about our vision, and that they weren't seeing it just from Nashville,
It
but they were
wasn't just an email, it was a person
right. They were seeing
bringing
it
in a
on the
passion, a
ground.
vision. Yep.
And, community boards, neighborhood associations, landmarks, the elected folks have incredible influence on how, we move through that regulatory process. So it's been important to get their feedback, their insights, to trust who we are as a university because we're new in the space in New York.
Mhm.
But then, of course, you get into the details of actually going through the regulatory process.
Right.
And we don't shy away from the fact that it may feel, bigger and more substantive than maybe other places we've explored before. The bar is high in New York. We know the bar is high. That's why we want to be in New York. The bar is high. And so we knew what this would be like. And I think we're fortunate to have partners to help us move through that process.
Yeah, and I'll take it from there if that's all right.
Mhm.
New York City is certainly a unique regulatory environment, and I think all of the clients that we work with have to go through the myriad agencies that need to sign off on a project like this. So having relationships with the Department of Buildings and the Department of Transportation and the Landmarks Preservation Commission and having an overall comprehensive strategy, knowing the right partners that we talked about previously. Buyer Blender Bell has been great in this process,
Mhm.
as well as our expediter, and developing an overall strategy for approaching all these different agencies and starting early. I think that's one of the things you mentioned, James, is starting early with the community. You start early with the regulatory agencies. You make sure that they know what your timeline is. They know what your approach to this project is. They
Being
know what
very
you're phasing.
transparent from the beginning.
Exactly. Being very transparent and letting them know what you would like to do and getting their buy-in, because if you have their buy-in, they're going to be much more interested in helping you achieve your goals at the same time. Because that's what I've found with every agency that I've ever worked with, is that they want to help you get there. We need to do all the work to make sure that we're ready, but they want to help you get there. And especially with educational institutions in New York City, the regulatory agencies want for this to happen. So it's an exciting moment as we commence this process and start to build this framework. And I think James's and Matt's passion about the campus and about growth and about the opportunity, and the provost's passion about this is really exciting. And that's all going to translate into the way we approach these regulatory agencies.
So Matt and RJ, this might be more for you. Can you describe this timeline from initial concept to groundbreaking, and then also to touch on what James talked about? What are the phases of opening? How does this all kind of come together for the Chelsea campus here?
Yes, I'll say you start with maybe what we just talked about, which is you have to go on your own journey of discovery to figure out what the campus is, what its history represents, what each one of the buildings has and doesn't have. And you have to do that journey together. The provost's office, the executive director, the owner's representative. We all had to understand exactly what each building, what it was made out of, what it was intended for, what its unique characteristics might be. I mean, the chapel has 100-year-old stained glass windows imported from England. That's something that transcends anything that we're going to do here. There are other parts of the campus that, quite frankly, have things that we need to completely replace. But if you come into something and decide you're going to renovate it your way, without understanding exactly what it is, you're going to waste the opportunity. So I'd say you start there with understanding exactly what the campus represents. Then you backwards plan to when the provost wants to open. If the provost wants to open, we're going to open. And then we do our backwards planning to go, okay, what's reasonable to get done given what each building's condition and what its uniqueness represents within the time frame that we have. And then outside of that time frame, if things aren't, maybe they're long lead items, or maybe we're going to need full commission approval for some change that we're going to do. Understanding that there are other things that we're going to have to phase in across the life of the project, and then we backwards plan that as well, and then cast these other events into the future, and then working with James and the provost's office to go, okay, how do we fit these elements in that are not going to fit into the initial schedule to open the campus, but put them in when time permits and when operations permit, because at that point, construction really needs to be something that isn't seen or heard.
Right.
Yeah, and I really appreciate working with Matt on this process
Mhm.
because Vanderbilt has incredibly ambitious aspirations with this campus, both from a scope and a schedule standpoint. And Matt understands what we can do and what we can't do, and
He has the
how
background
to
to make
yeah,
make
and
those
one
calls.
and I think the political will to have hard conversations with the stakeholders that are involved
Mhm.
so that they understand why we're advising the way that we're advising. Why a piece of the project we may say we're going to wait on this part of it because this is going to be the impact if we don't finish it.
Yeah.
And I think that those conversations and how adeptly they've been handled has made this planning process really successful so far. Because it's an incredibly complicated project. Every space is being touched in some capacity, and meanwhile, James is running events and having other things as we're preparing for students. So it's a very active campus. We're used to doing this type of dance for our institutional clients, but it's been very, very helpful to have folks on the inside that understand it well enough to navigate the stakeholders who are involved. Because that's the hardest part is the people.
So in this planning phase, though, how are you balancing spending for work that might not proceed? I mean, what's that dance like? If we keep talking about dancing here. I mean, what's that spending during the planning phase when things are a little still unknown?
Well, I mean, first, like I said, you have to understand your schedule and what you can do. But if you understand the campus and you understand your schedule, then really what you're trying to do is inform leadership decisions about scope and cost. It really follows nicely with respecting the historical significance of each one of the buildings. Meaning, if you want to do wholesale gut and replace of what is there, you're going to destroy your schedule and your budget. But if you respect the historical use of those facilities and then understand what the provost wants to use them for, what administration wants to use them for, and you fit that within the campus. And Vanderbilt fits very nicely into Chelsea, right? The teaching spaces will remain teaching spaces, the administrative spaces, the dormitory spaces, the event spaces. I mean, respecting those and reusing those for their intended original purpose is going to be a lot lower risk for the university, and it really helps plan the project almost on its own if you just respect what the campus can provide.
In these dense urban environments, RJ, what logistical challenges are you faced with that you might not be facing at the Nashville campus, for example? What type of environment for these kind of renovations are you up against?
Sure. Well, all of our clients have a campus in some way, shape, or form. So first talking about the similarities
Hmm.
is that we're going to have to make sure that the space is safe as a campus, that the operations, that the movement of pedestrians and faculty, staff, guests to the campus, that the logistics of the space are managed so tightly that safety is paramount, and I think that's the most important piece. And the next is the community impact. We're going to be potentially having deliveries on adjacent streets and logistics, and there's going to be noise periodically, and a variety of different construction impacts that we'll have to manage on the campus community. And in this type of an environment, it's not just your campus stakeholders that you need to manage. Make sure that your students understand what's happening with construction, or your faculty, or you're timing things around an academic calendar or around events that are on campus, but also you have residences that are right next door for community members that are not associated with your campus. And so you've got to be very thoughtful and respectful about how what you're doing is impacting your neighbors.
Communication and respect seems to be
Exactly.
key.
Communication is a key, very thorough, detailed planning with firms and teams specifically that have expertise in this. They have to understand how to operate in campuses like we're going to be building here. So it's just such an important piece of it.
Yeah, I would say if you compare it to the central neighborhood residential communities that we're building on the Nashville campus, which is very much a design from the ground up. In art terms, it's a white canvas. Right? We can do a myriad of things with a ground up build. This is the equivalent of a masterpiece that has to be lovingly restored while respecting what it is. But at the end, it still has to serve its purpose.
Right.
It still has to create that environment of learning and discovery. It still must have the most modern amenities to enable that growth for the researchers and the students. And you have to provide that on schedule, on budget.
And to touch on that, so when designing for things like dormitories or residential spaces, I'm assuming here we got to prepare these kids, these students, for real life in an urban center. So, have your design standards changed? Um, what's different about the design from the Nashville campus to here in those types of spaces for your students?
Specifically, when we get down into the design elements, it's like, okay, within the brownstone and brick that is here in Chelsea, how do we create the most modern amenities without it looking like we've disturbed a masterpiece?
But also, it's New York, so like a dishwasher might not be a requirement,
Right.
which might seem crazy in Nashville to not have one.
Yeah.
That's
The
right.
exposed brick wall, right? That
Right.
just adds a character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how does that trickle into features you're incorporating for collaboration purposes in terms of faculty, students, New York's large professional community? Um, and has programming mirrored that, or is it going to? I mean, how does that all play a part?
Yeah, I mean, so collaboration is key for us. So some of the spaces, fortunately, so on our campus in New York, we have these historic buildings, and then we actually have a newer build on the edge of
Mm.
campus. And that space was designed to be more of a collaborative community convening kind of space for students, really a library student gathering space. And so it's already built out into these smaller rooms where students can get together or get together with faculty for classes. We'll of course invest in technology. That of course takes that little classroom to the world
Right.
in a lot of ways. But fostering that environment's going to be critical for us. And when we think about on our undergraduate program, the idea is that students are connecting with industry. They're going to be in internships. And so we think about education and where that's going with internships, but then think about how people work today.
Right.
So students aren't just learning, but they're learning and working at the same time. And that actually can be hybrid. So
Mhm.
we also have to create an environment where students will be working potentially 25 hours a week with industry, but one day a week they're remote
Mhm.
in that industry. So do we have Zoom booths where they get quiet spaces? Do we have offices that they can hotel in? We want to get them out of their dorm room
Mhm.
or their residence hall because, like all New York City apartments, they're not huge rooms. You know, you're there to live
Right.
and not necessarily to work.
Mhm.
And so the campus also needs to be activated in this other way that I think that'll be really interesting, unique, and we have that's the lens with which we're also looking at these spaces.
Right.
And that design process becomes very iterative. What he was just describing of, working with the provost office and working with James to let's add this feature, or let's put this requirement in this particular space. That might completely change the electrical loading or the mechanical loading in that space.
Right.
And now we've got to, as we say, completely reprogram. But you have to be willing to do that. And we've done that dozens of times on this project. And we just have to be able to articulate, okay, what does that really mean? But when you have the best folks, and we do, you can always recover from those. And I think it's that adaptability and flexibility that we're trying to put into the
Mhm.
Chelsea campus that is going to really maximize the student experience. But you have to be willing to constantly redesign, and we are.
Well, and I know we've talked about this offline, guys, but the lab for the future.
Mm.
Mm.
What experimental approaches to the education spaces? How are you changing utilization maybe from a standard? How are you testing kind of this lab of the future?
Well, I think we see it already with our students who come here without a structured program.
Mm.
So they go to the different cities to do internships in the summertime, or possibly they're doing a capstone already in New York City or, West Palm Beach during the academic year. So we've tested sort of this model already. We
I
know
see.
that's the case. We also, I think, really interestingly, from a stakeholder standpoint, when we were talking about New York, we do a lot of pulse surveys on campus. Generally, you do them with students, and they're a text pulse, and the response rate is fairly low. You get excited if maybe you get 3 to 5% response rate. We did a pulse survey for New York City. This was months ago,
Mhm.
and the response rate was off the charts, and the interest rate was in like the high 80s.
Oh, wow.
So we know that this is
Wow.
what students are looking for,
Okay.
Oh,
and we know that this is going to be the
So you're
future
getting the
for us.
feedback.
We're getting the feedback, and the faculty too. I mean, we started we have to lead with the academic program
Mhm.
because that's what higher education is. And so our faculty, we have a committee that really launched our programming, all of the events that we had this spring. Great turnout, 250 people, packed rooms.
So this is not
Um,
done in silos.
this is not at all done in silos. And I think it's done with that student centered, academic centered approach. And we know that this is what our community is looking for.
Interesting. So looking ahead, Vanderbilt might be leading the way, but there are other universities, higher education
Mm.
organizations that are looking to others for a blueprint. How do they expand? How do they navigate these changes in the education world? What advice would you give? What are your top three takeaways for someone that comes to you and says, "Hey, we're kind of thinking about doing this"? I would love to hear from all three of you. Kind of, what's your here's step one. Go for it. Good luck.
You want to start?
Sure.
Go ahead.
There are a couple of keys related to the team. One, your internal team and really your owner's rep is an extension of that internal team. You better have the best possible folks on that team. And our internal team is outstanding from start to finish. They're experts in their field and they're highly professional, but they're also humble and willing to admit when they don't know something, so that we can really leverage each other's strengths. But I think each campus is going to bring some type of unique challenge, and the way that you push through that unique challenge is to say, okay, uh, every single one of us is inadequate to take on this challenge. This 120 plus year old campus, this regulatory framework that is New York, this schedule to turn this campus over by the provost, all of us will fall short. Every plan will fall short on delivery. But all of us together, we got a shot. And not only a shot, I would say it's probably fairly easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think Matt makes a great point because we're lucky to sit here today and talk about this experience with New York City and growth. But what you don't see behind us are the teams of people who are absolutely incredible. When I thought about taking this role, no way could I undergo or undertake any of this without just the thought leadership, the drive, the dedication, the collaborative spirit that we have on campus. If you don't have that with vision um, and the planning, you're not going to get very far in it. And I think the feedback I would give to is the stakeholder engagement is key. It has helped us through the regulatory process. It helped us, identify this opportunity, and that starts on campus. It starts with your students. It starts with your faculty. It starts with your alumni. That's how we got to New York City today. It was all of that together. So, think about that strategy when you're looking at growth opportunities. Make sure you're communicating, building, strategizing with
Mm.
insight, feedback from key stakeholders, because they're the ones who will make you successful in
Right.
this.
All right, RJ.
Yeah, and
What are your key takeaways?
yeah, well, I will. There are two things that I heard both of them say. I just want to emphasize. The first is the team, because I think the team is critical. Both the team on the client side, the consultants that we work with, and above all, my own personal team, who I think does an exceptional job at working around the clock to deliver this project for Vanderbilt. I think the second is that what Matt was saying about an institution really knowing itself well enough, because this is a trend. We're seeing this happen in major urban areas around the country and internationally. I think it was a more common trend historically, and now it's becoming a more common trend in the United States. And it is a risky bet. So having the right partners, knowing yourself, doing pilot programs, trying to figure out less risky ways to test out certain strategies, leasing space versus buying space, renovating versus building new, some things that lower your capital investment off the bat. And you make sure that you have these opportunities if you need to pull back, that you have them available. Because we're always contingency planning. That is 99% of what I'm doing is thinking about contingencies. If this doesn't happen, what do we do? If this doesn't happen, what do we do? And that's very much the way that this would need to be approached, is because it could be very devastating if it's done wrong, but it could be amazing if done right. So I think knowing the institution, knowing itself, knowing that its brand is strong enough to carry a different city, when a lot of times these brands are so equated with one location in the United States. It's Boston or it's Nashville or it's San Francisco or Miami, that to go to a different location can be a really risky proposition.
But mitigating it in smart ways
Yes.
and being thoughtful and strategic.
Yep.
Right. All right. Well, thank you all. This has been very insightful.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you for joining us for the Construction Insiders podcast. You can continue the conversation by leaving a comment, asking a question, or participating in our poll. You can also visit us at cumming-group.com for more great resources from the most trusted team in the built environment. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes.